Our regular science reporter, Dr. Chris Smith, is on study leave this week, so we're pleased to welcome in his place this morning a bright young thing with a very big future in science journalism, Robyn Williams from The Science Show. Robyn, hello.
I'm being very hopeful, yes, one day.
You'll get there, mate. Just keep on trying. I think I can. Robyn, is this as big as it sounds? The Royal Institution is, renowned for displaying science to the public, for bringing us the best scientific endeavours.
Yes, it's just off Piccadilly. It's been there for about 210 years, and it was for the people's science. It was headed by people like Humphrey Davy and the great Michael Faraday. In fact, at the bottom of this huge building there, they've actually got Michael Faraday's laboratory, and you can go in and see his apparatus, and this gives me an incredible thrill every time I see it. There's the first ever electric motor sitting there that he made, which transformed civilization. We're surrounded in this room by electric motors of various stuff, and that's where it happened. But they also had public lectures, and they were so popular that the carriages outside were in a huge jumble, and they invented the first one-way street in London.
To cope with the crowds.
That's right, yeah. And so, some of the lectures were posh and people got dressed up and they had all sorts of ceremonies, like you had to come in at 7 o'clock precisely and finish at exactly 8, and people were dressed up in white tie and posh frocks and various other things like that. But there was a tremendous coming and going with the public. So you had actual real science being done on the premises, and you had the popularisation of science. And the point about the Australian connection is that one of the guys who transformed the place is Lawrence Bragg. Now, Bragg, born in Adelaide, who graduated from the University of Adelaide at some incredibly early age, is still the youngest person in history to win the Nobel Prize. And he was director. And so next Thursday, as they open the Royal Institution, RI Oz in Adelaide, they start something called the Bragg Initiative, which is, an educational bringing science to the people effort, named after this man, who I think should be one of the most transcending heroes like Faraday, and yet so few people have heard of him.
Yes, have we got him on a stamp at least or something?
He has been on a stamp, yeah.
Oh, that's good. So Lawrence Bragg is the connection. That's why this Royal Institution office is being...
that's one of the reasons.
Outreach is being opened in Adelaide.
The other reason is the infamous Susan Greenfield, Baroness Greenfield, who's
she's got
director
that thinker in residence
London.
thing with Adelaide.
That's right. And Mike Rann, the Premier of South Australia, really should get 15 stamps and a smiley because he's made such fantastic efforts for science in this country, which will be opened, on a national basis next Thursday.
And Robyn, having a branch of the Royal Institution in Adelaide, do you think that will make a tangible difference? Is it possible to quantify or think about the sort of difference just having that there might make to science in Adelaide or science more broadly in Australia?
Well, it already has for the last 3 years, and I have to declare an interest. The Science Media Centre has been around for 3 years, and that's been feeding, scientific responses, for instance, to the tsunami, for instance, to the earthquakes in Indonesia. And bulletins go out, connections to the main scientists in this country, and the Science Media Centre, which will be on the top floor of the RI Oz, I think they moved in last week, has already made that huge difference. So it's beginning already. Secondly, there will be public events and there will be international kind of connections, especially to India, actually. So it's not just going to be an outpost of Britland. It'll be independent, sister organisation, and its main remit will be to look at not only the national part of Australia, but also our region and educational and scientific ideas.
It's a big deal, isn't it?
It should be.
And another Australian connection to some of the biggest news in science this week. On Monday evening, Sydney time, the Nobel Prize in Medicine will be announced, and there is a real chance we could be adding another Australian name to that illustrious list.
Well, indeed, especially that it's a woman. There have been only 12 women in science, in history, since 1901, got the Nobel Prize. And we're looking, I hope it's not going to jinx it. You may have seen it in the paper, in the Australian on Wednesday, Elizabeth Blackburn from Tasmania, who was at the University of Melbourne. Now she's in San Francisco. Her work on telomeres, which are the little shoelaces at the end of various parts of your cells, with the division of the DNA. They sort of keep the DNA kind of tied up, and there's an associated enzyme called telomerase, which has been connected to any number of diseases and aging. This is mega work. She's won everything else, Elizabeth Blackburn, so we hope that that's one possible Prize. And after that, of course, we get chemistry and physics. And the tip there may just be, you've heard of the Large Hadron Collider, the great big atom smasher in Switzerland, which is still on the blink. We hope that perhaps Peter Higgs, famous for the Higgs boson, which they're trying to discover there, might be recognised at last, because he's getting on a bit.
Okay, so some very big news. And just very briefly, I want to get to what you're doing in science this week too. These Nobel Prize decisions, how are they made?
Well, the medicine one is at the Karolinska Institute, which is for medical research. I've actually been there, and they sit around in the morning, and it's surprisingly small. And you imagine there'd be about a hall full of people with beards and trumpets, but in fact, it's a small committee comes out and say, well, these are the guys, and they make the decision that day. But for physics and chemistry and some of the others, it's the Academy of Science separately from the Karolinska in Sweden who make the decision, and they do so a couple of days after. And
so it's not really a transparent thing?
It's not, well, in fact, yeah, because plenty of people who got the Nobel Prize, senior people in Australia, for example, send suggestions.
Oh, okay.
So it's really well canvassed, and the list, people kind of know if they're on the inside. It's not just a bunch of strange people in Scandinavia saying, that one.
Okay. Robyn, it's fabulous to have you on our Friday Science Spot, but you are still doing your day job. What's in store for the science show tomorrow?
Well, one of the most exciting things, as far as I'm concerned, in the last few years is the work that's been done on bird brains. I mean, these wonderful creatures are twice as bright as anyone imagined.
Bird brains?
Yeah. Betty the Crow did famous work in Oxford, completely bamboozle people by turning a straight wire into a hook to get her food. In fact, they'd provided various hooks for male birds, and they'd forgotten Betty, and they'd left the video camera on, and suddenly the next morning they saw that Betty had fashioned herself a tool. Now, a bloke whose name you have to guess from Cambridge is following this up with rooks. And the thing about rooks is they had no experience of any of this engineering stuff, in the wild. And they had to get their food by putting pebbles in water to raise the level so that they get the worm. And this work is done by a Dr. Christopher Bird.
Oh, I love that. Don't you love that? I love it when the world works like that. That's the Science Show tomorrow at midday right here on ABC Radio National. Robyn, thanks very much.
Thanks, Fran.
And good luck to Elizabeth Blackburn. We've all got our fingers crossed for you.
Yes, very quietly.
It's 6:45 on RN Breakfast.